"Come on, Rachel, drink this soup." It was cold. I opened my eyes and saw a tattered calendar with the portrait of a great leader hanging on the crumbling mud wall. December 29, 1977. I had been reborn. I would never forget this day. It was the day that changed the course of my fate. This was the first year the college entrance exam had been reinstated. It was also the day after I received my admission letter from the Department of Electronics and Mechanical Engineering at Capital Institute of Technology. My mother walked in carrying a bowl of soup, pushing open the drafty wooden door. A gust of cold wind followed her inside, sweeping through the broken-down house. My heart ached. I knew. My own mother had drugged the soup. I could never forget what had happened on this very day in my past life. Back then, a lame and ugly old bachelor in our town named Walter Harris had caught a glimpse of my younger sister Emily while collecting ration coupons. One look and he became obsessed. He took out all the money he had, 30 Yuan, and demanded to marry her. My mom, greedy for the money but unwilling to part with Emily, decided to make me take her place. Clutching my admission letter, I fell to my knees and kowtowed until my forehead was bloodied, begging her not to send me. I promised I would study hard, make lots of money, and give her and the family a good life. But she kicked me aside, snatched away my admission letter, and shouted, "I've suffered raising you. Don't even think I'll keep paying for your education. You're marrying Walter Harris, and those 31 will give us a better life. That money will buy me some peace and help your sister marry into a good family with a proper dowry." That very same day, a young, educated man from the village came with another marriage proposal. For a high-ranking military officer from the city, he had served in battle, killed enemies, and was a decorated national hero. Coming from a powerful and prestigious family, he was said to have some psychological trauma from his missions and had grown extremely picky, which was why he remained unmarried. His parents thought city girls were too delicate and couldn't handle his temper, so they were looking for a pretty and capable rural wife who could take care of him. They even offered to support her through college. The young man said to my mom, "Both your daughters are beautiful. Just choose the one who's more sensible." To my mother, it was like winning the lottery. She immediately pushed Emily forward and didn't hesitate to drug me. That night, she had Walter Harris carry me off. By the time I woke up, it was already too late. And so in that life, Emily went to Capital Institute in my place and eventually married that city officer, Charles Liu. Now, staring at the bowl of soup in front of me and at the mother who had spent her entire life playing favorites, I said coldly, "I'm not drinking it." She stepped forward and tried to force the bowl to my lips. "Drink it," she snapped. My chest tightened with pain as I resisted her. In a fit of rage, she slapped me hard across the face. "Don't be so ungrateful." I grabbed her raised hand and glared at her. "I won't let you ruin my life again. I'm not getting married. I'm going to college." Infuriated and humiliated, she opened her mouth to curse me again. But just then, Emily burst in, grabbing her hand to stop her from slapping me again. "I'll marry him," Emily said, dragging our mother's arm back. She shot me a glance, her expression sharp and calculating. And in that moment, I knew she had come back too. My mom was stunned. She had always favored Emily to the point where she didn't even try to hide it. I glared at Emily and said loudly, "Emily, are you insane? That's Walter Harris, the most infamous old bachelor in town." Mom turned to me and snapped. "The city officer's last name is Liu. I think his full name is Charles Liu. He lives in a big house, has power, influence, and money. His family is even willing to pay for your college. Once you graduate, you'll marry him. And your life will be smooth from then on." At the mention of Charles Liu, Emily's face turned pale, then red. Her expression twisted, with something complex and difficult to describe. She was terrified of falling into that same trap again. "I don't want to talk about it," Emily said impatiently. "Mom, just stay out of it. Trust me, life with Walter Harris will be way better. Let Rachel marry Charles Liu." She shot me a smug glance, clearly enjoying herself. Right at that moment, Walter Harris came swaggering in like he owned the place, grinning shamelessly. Emily didn't even look back. She walked out with him without hesitation. My mom, fuming with rage, grabbed my admission letter and tore it to pieces. "You're going to the city with Leisure Cheam right now." Forget school. You're marrying Officer Liu immediately. Now that Emily had secured herself a wealthy husband, I was the only daughter left. My mom just wanted to get her hands on the betrothal gift from the Liu family as soon as possible. She tossed the shredded admission letter into the fire pit by the king bed. It burned into ashes right before my eyes. I knew in that moment I had no other choice but to seek refuge with Charles Liu. I needed his help if I wanted any chance of continuing my education. That afternoon, I left with leisure Cheam without a shred of attachment. We met Charles Liu at his family's old home in the center of the city. The house, though clearly inherited from older generations, was large and impressive, if a bit worn by time. Still, it had an undeniable air of dignity. Lee and I stood in the center of the spacious living room. When Charles Liu walked in, he was tall, straight-backed, and expressionless. His sharp eyes locked onto me for a long time before his tightly pressed lips finally parted. Rachel, I nodded. Leisure Cheam quickly stepped forward with a flattering smile. Rachel is well known in our village, hardworking, capable, and very sensible. She's beautiful too, just not dressed up. She even studied in secret and managed to get into Capital Institute. Smart girl, you'll have smart kids with her. Charles Liu waved his hand, clearly growing impatient. I'll figure something out about your request to return to the city. Thanks for handling this. He glanced at me. Leisure Cheam, no fool. Knew it was time to leave. I'll be troubling you then, Officer Liu. I'll head back to the village. I've still got chores waiting. No need to stay, Charles said with his usual commanding tone. Once Lee was gone, I suddenly felt nervous about what I needed to say next. But for the sake of my education, my future, I summoned the courage. Officer Liu, I said, my admission letter to Capital Institute. My mom burned it. Could you help me? You're already negotiating with me. He snapped. His brows furrowed tightly as his piercing gaze bore into me. I immediately shut my mouth. In my past life, I knew how miserable Emily had been after marrying him. That talk about minor psychological trauma. In truth, it was full-blown PTSD from his combat missions. He was unpredictable and emotionally volatile. Seeing me fall silent, he finally spoke again in a low, steady voice. There are 3 conditions. I held my breath. First, I cannot stand the sound of crying or screaming from women. Second, I will meet all your material needs, but don't expect any affection from me. Third, you must accept Shayu and her son living in this house. Shayu, I was stunned. Shayu was his childhood friend. She had married Charles Liu's brother. That brother had died saving Charles during a mission. Piecing things together from what I'd overheard from Li Chiching on the way here, I suddenly understood why the Liu family wanted a rural bride. No respectable city girl would ever agree to those 3 conditions. This marriage was entirely arranged by his parents. Charles clearly wasn't willing, but he was a devoted son and obeyed our duty. In my past life, Emily hadn't cared about studying. All she wanted was to marry Charles Liu as soon as possible. She dropped out halfway through her freshman year and married him. Neither she nor my mother had ever mentioned the 3 conditions. They must have agreed to them in secret, but were clearly uneasy about Shayu. Fearing future complications, they rushed the marriage. Because at the very moment Charles mentioned Shayu, I saw a rare gentleness flicker in his eyes. And with Emily's selfish, jealous nature, even after marrying him, there's no way she could have endured that. He and my mother both cared deeply about appearances. With his childhood sweetheart and her son living in the house, they couldn't possibly say anything about it publicly. All anyone on the outside knew was that Charles Liu often hid his wife. They had no idea what really happened behind closed doors. At last, I saw the full picture. This had to be the true reason why Charles and Emily's marriage had been a complete disaster. But I didn't care about those 3 conditions because I never intended to marry Charles Liu. And I had no plans to take a single penny from the Liu family. I smiled slightly. Officer Liu, I know this marriage was arranged by your parents. You're probably not that willing deep down, but you're a devoted son. You'd never go against your parents. You're also at the age where marriage is expected. Charles's eyes flickered. He hadn't expected me to speak to him so directly, so calmly. Officer Liu, I continued. If you're not willing, we can take things slow. Maybe after I graduate, something will change. Maybe we won't have to go through with this marriage at all. He was even more shocked now. He had assumed that a village girl like me would be overjoyed just to be matched with someone like him, clinging to the opportunity, no matter what. He had no idea I'd already lived a whole life once before. In my previous life, though I never got to attend university, I still climbed to the peak of wealth and power. I'd seen the world. And from what I learned, a woman can only rely on herself, not on her husband, not on her sons. I knew better than anyone what marriage could become, what men could become. People used to say I had a lucky fate, that I'd somehow landed on my feet by marrying Walter Harris, the lame and ugly old bachelor no one else wanted. No one could have predicted how that story would turn around. Walter, as it turned out, was born under a lucky star. He was shrewd in business, knew how to make money, and gave me a life of luxury and wealth. But what no one ever knew was that I was the one who had built that fortune for him. Back then, he was a gambling addict and had racked up debt outside. He tried to take the only money I had saved for myself. When I refused, he beat me, then tried to snatch my small radio to sell it off. That radio was the only thing of value my father had secretly left me before he passed, something he'd hidden from both my mom and Emily. During our struggle, the radio was smashed. I sat there, blood dripping from the corner of my mouth, holding the broken radio in my arms, crying. That radio was the only warmth I had in this world, the only way I had to connect with the outside world. That night, I stayed up under the weak glow of a kerosene lamp, eyes swollen from crying, carefully piecing the broken radio back together. I had no idea I would actually fix it. I'd always been fascinated by electronics and machinery since I was a kid. That's why I had applied to study electrical and mechanical engineering at university. And right then, it hit me. This could be a way to make a living. I started walking from house to house around town, asking if anyone had a broken radio, TV, or refrigerator. I repaired them for free at first, just to practice. After a few months of honing my skills, I began charging small fee. As more families could afford appliances, business kept growing. Eventually, Walter saw that I had found a solid way to earn money. Under my insistence, he gave up gambling and started learning repairs with me. Life got better. He treated me better. We made our first real income by fixing small appliances for people. We became the first family in town to save up over 10,000 yuan. When the economy opened up, we moved to the city and opened a small repair shop. Then we became the richest family in the area during the 1980s, worth millions. Later, we founded our own electrical appliance brand, turned it into a national chain, a household name, and entered the ranks of the global Fortune 500. The company's assets grew to tens of billions. I gave Walter 3 sons, but as I spent more time raising the kids, I had less energy to focus on the business. Walter persuaded me to step away, to come home and take care of the boys full-time. I agreed and became a stay-at-home mom, fully handing the business over to him. We had built everything from scratch. And when Walter finally stood at the top, wealthy and powerful in charge of both the company and our fortune, he changed again. He began to resent me for being an uneducated housewife, for being a woman from the countryside. And once he became a big boss, day after day, Walter was out chasing women. He got involved with pretty young secretaries and tangled up with powerful businesswomen. The 3 sons I had raised with my own hands all went abroad for their studies. They'd seen the world, and when they returned, they began bending over backward to please Walter, also they could inherit more of his wealth. One by one, they started to look down on me, said I came from a humble background, said I was out of touch with society, said I embarrassed them. Even my grandchildren clung to Walter's side, some of them even trying to cozy up to the women he kept outside. On the surface, I lived a life of wealth and status, but inside I was dead. In the end, I died depressed and hollow. In this life, how could I still hold out hope for others? How could I waste my talent again, building a future just to hand it over to someone else? All I wanted now was to study hard, master real skills, and take control of my own fate to pursue a life of value that I chose. Since Charles Liu didn't truly want to marry me and was only doing this to fulfill his parents' wishes, It was clear that Shayu was the one he really loved. That worked out even better for me. I looked him in the eye and spoke my mind without hesitation. My admission letter was burned by my mother. Officer Liu, if you're willing to help, if you could vouch for me to the school. I just need the chance to study. Then you'll have 4 full years before we need to marry. You can take that time to think about whether this is what you want. I don't think your parents will pressure us in the meantime. Charles stepped forward, getting close. Rachel, are you trying to back out of the engagement? Or is it that you can't accept one of the 3 conditions? And this is your way of threatening me. He didn't give me a chance to respond. Which one is it you can't accept? He demanded. Shayu, there's nothing between us. If you want to be part of the Liu family, you'll need to have some tolerance. Charles kept pressing me, and he looked genuinely angry now. I didn't understand where this hostility was coming from. I was trying to think of how to explain when a sharp, cheerful voice rang out behind me. Shi Chen. I turned around and saw a fashionable, stunning woman walking in with a glowing smile. She held a little boy's hand, and her eyes were full of affection as she looked at Charles for a long moment before turning to size me up from head to toe. That was Shayu. Charles's tense expression immediately softened at her arrival. This is Raid blandly. She's from the countryside. Shayu's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered and offered me her hand. Hi, I'm Claire Yu. Charles pulled her back a little and said gently, she just came in from the village. Her hands are dirty from farm work. The little boy climbed up onto Charles's lap and said sweetly, Daddy Charles, Mommy Claire, can we go to the amusement park now? Charles nodded, all right, let's go. The 3 of them left together. But just before going out the door, Charles turned back and looked at me coldly. About what you said, I'm not backing out of the engagement, but we can wait until you finish college before getting married. I'll have someone from the school write a verification letter for you tomorrow. Then he shouted, Miss Wang, prepare a guest room for her. I quietly let out a breath of relief, then held another one in. I could finally go to school. But what did he mean? He wasn't backing out of the engagement. After a long day, I was too exhausted to think about it. Originally, Li Chichin had told me I'd be living at the Liu family's house from now on. And honestly, I had nowhere else to go. I was penniless. For now, I had no choice but to stay here temporarily. Once school started, I'd move into the dorms, get up a part-time job, and slowly repay Charles for his help. Then we'd be even. I got into college smoothly and was preparing to move out of the Liu household. But unexpectedly, Charles refused. He was completely firm. I wasn't allowed to leave. Officer Liu, I told him, thank you for helping me get into school. I won't forget this favor. I'll work to repay it. He smirked slightly. Rachel, the costs of living here, you can pay those back with money. But getting you into college, that's a huge favor I've done for you. How do you plan to repay it? I froze for a moment. You're not allowed to move out. Charles said, since you'll be staying here and I'm often not around, you'll help take care of Claire and Evan. For 4 years. Otherwise, I could just as easily let you lose your place at school. You know I have that power. Charles Liu, what a cruel man. He didn't need to hurt me physically. He went straight for the heart. He wanted his so-called fiancée to work like a servant for his beloved White Moonlight and her son. Thinking back to my past life, with Emily's competitive and proud personality, no wonder that marriage had ended in a disaster. But for me, it didn't matter. Getting to go to school was already the greatest blessing. As long as I could repay Charles for the favor, even serving in his household as a so-called fiancé didn't bother me. After a few seconds of silence, I nodded. All right. Charles' tightly knit brows seemed to ease a little. He murmured to himself, 4 years is enough. But I hadn't expected Claire Yu to make things so difficult. After classes, I had to work part-time at a repair shop. When I got back, Claire always had a never-ending list of chores waiting for me. Every night without fail, she demanded I wash her and Evan's feet. I endured all of it until sophomore year. One day, I got my period, and my stomach was killing me. Claire was once again barking orders at me, and I couldn't take it anymore. I said, the water's already heated and brought over. You can wash yourself. As soon as Evan heard that, he kicked the basin over. Bad woman, you're bullying my moms. Claire instantly pulled him into her arms, and scolded me. My son grew up without a father. He's sensitive. You don't need to say things like that in front of him to hurt his feelings. I stared at her stunned, like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. I was just about to argue when I heard footsteps behind me. Charles had walked in. The moment Claire saw him, her whole demeanor changed. She put on a pitiful face and said softly, "I knew it. Ji Chen, you only asked her to take care of us because you didn't want us to suffer. But she hates us, I can tell. That's why she deliberately boiled the water so hot and scalded Evan. We don't want to trouble her anymore. Evan and I will move out tomorrow. I'll talk to you about it later." Charles looked down at the spilled water, the overturned basin, Evan crying at the top of his lungs. Without asking a thing, he grabbed my arm and slapped me across the face. "Rachel, Evan's father died saving my life. We owe this mother and son everything. You're in college now and still don't understand basic gratitude, acting like a spoiled child. Don't be so cold-hearted." I stared at Charles in disbelief. Claire held the crying Evan in her arms, her face full of pitiful grievance, but I could see the satisfaction behind her eyes. Clutching my stinging cheek, I glared at Charles. Word by word, I bit out, "Charles Liu, if anyone should repay a debt of gratitude, it's you. If you want to return that favor, you take care of them. I agreed to repay your help getting into college, but I never agreed to be bullied by them. What gives you the right to treat me this way?" Charles answered coldly, "Because you're my fiancé. You marry the man, you marry his burdens and marrying me. You're already reaching higher than you deserve. What, now taking care of my benefactor's family counts as abuse to you? I didn't know you were so delicate." As soon as those words left his mouth, "You're my fiancé," Claire's face changed. She gently nudged Evan, and Evan immediately ran over and clung to Charles' leg. "Mommy is your real fiancé." "She is." "That woman's bad." Claire hurried over and scooped him up, pretending to scold him in embarrassment. "Kids say the darndest things. Zichun, he's getting so out of hand lately. I don't know what's going on in his little head." She glanced at me, but there was a smug smile tugging at her lips. Charles let out a deep sigh, his eyes softening as he looked at that mother and son. Then he turned to me, his expression once again cold and stern. Charles scolded me and turned to leave. I watched his figure disappear into the distance. I knew deep down that he wished Claire you could be his fiancée, but the Liu family would never approve of her. And I was just the woman his parents had forced him to marry. For the past 2 years, I had asked nothing of him. I made no demands, caused no fights, and never stirred up trouble. That was the only reason things hadn't turned into a disaster like they did between him and Emily in the last life. We had been able to coexist in peace. But now, with Claire and her son living here, even this fragile peace was starting to fall apart. Over these 2 years, Charles's parents, who lived elsewhere, would occasionally visit to see me. They treated me kindly, but they had no idea I intended to break off the engagement after graduation. That made me feel a bit guilty. I'd become one of the top students in the entire school, even representing the university and winning the national championship in electronic mechanical engineering. I'd become a modestly well-known figure across the country. The Liu parents adored me even more, but I continued to refuse any money from the Liu family. My advisor, Professor Li Mengwen, saw how hard I worked between classes and part-time jobs. Out of sympathy, he bent the rules to let me into his graduate research project, which allowed me to earn a bit of extra money. There really are good people in this world. Still, I knew I had to move out of the Liu household as soon as possible. And now, under these circumstances, even if I did leave, the university and faculty could protect me. Charles probably wouldn't be able to sabotage my education again. Right as the relationship between me and Charles had reached a freezing point, and I was making serious plans to move out of the Liu house, my mom and Emily suddenly showed up. Walter Harris had gambled away everything they had. When he wasn't drinking, he was gambling. And when he wasn't gambling, he was beating Emily. At first, Emily had still clung to hope, dreaming that Walter would make a fortune by fixing appliances like he had in the previous life. She wanted to sit back and enjoy a luxurious life. But all she saw was him leaving early, coming home late, and demanding she find ways to help pay off his gambling debts. Eventually, After yet another violent beating that left her bruised and bloodied, Emily fled to our village and cried to my mother. She said Walter had threatened her that if she didn't get him money, he'd kill her. My mom felt sorry for Emily, but she no longer had anything left to give. That's when she remembered that since I hadn't officially married Charles yet, the Liu family hadn't paid the bride price. She'd been afraid to offend them, so she hadn't dared ask directly. She had someone reach out to me through a go-between, and I told them only, after graduation, we'll talk about marriage. Then she tried going to Liji King, hoping to get more information. Leary assured her, saying the Liu family was well off and reputable, they wouldn't shortchange her. But such formalities took time and couldn't be rushed. My mom had to drop the matter for a while. Now, desperate for Emily's sake, she came straight to the Liu home to ask in person. When they arrived, Charles greeted them courteously, and I temporarily put our Cold War aside and came out with him. Emily looked like she had aged 10 years. Her face was pale and thin, covered in bruises. She looked haggard and beaten down. Seeing me living in the Liu household, even if it wasn't a glamorous life, it was certainly not the chaotic mess she had expected. Compared to her current situation, I was doing far better. I don't know why, but Charles even gently wrapped his arm around my waist. When Emily saw that, her face turned stormy with resentment and disbelief. As soon as my mom sat down, she shamelessly asked, "Officer Liu, are you two still not planning to get married? My daughter's been living here all this time. No certificate, no ceremony. People are starting to talk." Charles glanced at me. I was just about to speak when he suddenly took my hand and said calmly, "Of course we'll get married, but not yet. I respect Rachel's wishes. She wants to wait until after she graduates." That shut my mom right up. When she realized it was me who didn't want to get married yet, she turned on me and pointed at my nose. "Shameless girl, living with a man without marrying him. You should think about your reputation. What will people say? That you're filthy. Cheap." Maybe it was my imagination, but I thought I caught a flicker of pain in Charles's eyes as he listened to my mom's nasty words. He frowned and raised his voice sharply. "She's been staying in the guest room. The Liu family does not tolerate this kind of vulgar, low-class abuse. If you keep talking like this, get out." My mom immediately shut her mouth in fright. I turned to look at Charles. A faint sense of gratitude had just begun to grow in me until Emily, unable to make sense of Charles Liu's warmth, respect, and even protectiveness toward me, started stirring trouble. This wasn't the cold, violent man she had known in the previous life. Trying to spark conflict, she suddenly said in a deliberately sarcastic tone, "I heard the Liu household still keeps a widow and her orphan child living here." That was, of course, something she remembered from her past life. Charles frowned and glanced at me, clearly assuming I had gossiped about him behind his back. His face darkened. "There are no widows or orphans in the Liu household," he said flatly. "Only people we owe a great debt to." Then he turned toward me, clenching his jaw and whispering, "Rachel, I gave you plenty of face in front of your mother and sister. And this is how you repay me. Going around talking about my household, like that seems you really can't accept Claire and Evan being here." His words immediately reminded me of that slap he gave me not long ago, completely unprovoked, simply for siding with Claire and her son. Any gratitude I had started to feel instantly vanished. This humiliation and bitterness surged back in full force. I never said anything, I told him coldly. "Believe whatever you want. Whether or not I can accept your benefactor and her son, that's not my place to decide. Officer Liu, we were only supposed to be in each other's lives for 2 more years and never meet again." Charles had never been defied so openly. The veins on his neck bulged with fury. His fists clenched tight. Emily saw the opportunity and smiled smugly. Her scheme had worked, but I hadn't planned on staying in the Liu household forever anyway, so I didn't care. She came over pretending to be friendly and took my hand, saying to Charles with fake sweetness, "Brother-in-law, my sister's a bit timid, but very smart and stubborn too. Please be patient with her." Charles brushed his sleeve angrily and stormed off. My mom, realizing Charles had walked away before she even got the chance to ask for money, panicked. She hadn't grasped what had just happened. To her, it was clearly my fault for upsetting Charles. She rushed at me and grabbed my collar. "This is all your fault. Now go get some money for your sister. Give it to Walter Harris." I looked at her coldly. "Why should I?" She reached out and tried to grab my throat because I gave birth to you. "I raised you." I tore her hand away. "You raised me." "It was Dad who raised me. After he died, I was the one who supported this family. Everything you and Emily wore and ate, I worked and paid for it. Everything I earned growing up, you took from me and gave to Emily. When I was 10, you gave her my winter coat. I had nothing but a thin, torn sweater in the middle of winter. Then Emily broke out in a rash, and you accused me of tampering with the coat to harm her. You beat me half to death. You don't remember that. Well, I do. So hear this. I'm officially cutting all ties with both of you. From now on, take care of yourselves." The moment my mom realized she could no longer get anything out of me and dared not direct her rage at the Liu family, she collapsed onto the floor, shrieking. "Ungrateful daughter, think you're better than us now. You got yourself a rich man and forgot your own mother. You heartless girl. You'll get what's coming to you." Just like in the last life, she thought Charles was just bad-tempered. She didn't know he had post-traumatic stress disorder, and that the thing he hated most was the sound of women screaming and crying. Her hysterics pushed him over the edge. Already furious with me, he now lost his last shred of patience. In a fit of rage, he called for the house staff. "Get them out of here," he ordered, "and don't ever let them set foot in the Liu household again." As she was being dragged away, Emily lost control. She shouted at me, her face twisted with disbelief. "Rachel, what trick did you play? Why is Charles defending you? Why is Walter Harris now just a useless drunken gambler?" I just smiled. "Emily," I said, "you can't build your life depending on someone else." Still sobbing, she spat out. "Aren't you doing the same? Aren't you depending on Charles? On the Liu family, we'll see. Your life won't be so easy either." I shook my head. "I don't rely on anyone. I'll be fine." Then I turned and closed the gate behind me. They had no one to turn to in the city, nowhere to go. Left with no choice, they returned to the village. I went back to the guest room in the backyard to continue packing my things. As I passed by Clara Yu's room, I overheard her comforting Charles. "Don't be mad, Ji-chan," she could. "That's just how country people are. Greedy, ungrateful, with no sense of propriety or class. When it really counts, they're just a pile of useless mud. Don't dirty yourself over this." Then I heard her say, "Here I made your favorite, Osmoth, this honey cake. Have some and calm down." She had just called all country people worthless mud. And that obviously included me. Charles let out a deep, heavy sigh. He didn't say a word. In front of Claire, he never defended me, not once. He only said softly, "Xiaoyue, you're always so understanding, so well-mannered." I smiled to myself, how perfect. A match made in heaven. I didn't linger. I turned and walked quickly back to my room. Tomorrow, I would officially move out of the Liu house and back into the campus dorms. It wasn't until a week later that Charles realized I had moved out. He showed up at the university just as I was stepping out of my professional studies class. The security guard called for me at the gate, saying someone was looking for me. When I stepped outside, I saw him leaning against a military green Jeep parked near the campus entrance. The moment he spotted me, he crushed out the cigarette at his fingertips. I stopped a few steps away from him. He walked up to me briskly. "Come back with me." I shook my head. "That won't be necessary. You promised to take care of Xiaoyue in heaven for 4 years, he said. I shook my head again. "I'll find another way to repay what I owe you, but I can't take care of them. There are so many servants in that house. Why do you need to use that mother and child to punish me?" I asked. "Why?" I stared directly at him, still unable to understand. Charles looked at me, his lips parting slightly as if to speak, but the words didn't come out. I looked at him and said sincerely, "If you really care about her, why not speak to Uncle and Aunt Lu? Fight for your happiness. There's no need to keep punishing yourself and others." It was heartfelt advice, but he suddenly bristled with anger. "I've told you over and over," he snapped. "Xiaoye and her son are the wife and child of someone who saved my life. The Liu family owes them everything. It's only right that we take care of them." I looked at him deeply. "Everything you've done for her, are you sure it's just repayment? Or are you using the idea of gratitude to justify what you really feel inside?" His face turned red with fury as he pointed at me. You're a college student now, even if you came from the countryside. Why are you still so narrow-minded, like some ignorant village woman? I found his words so absurd I couldn't help myself. For the first time, I called him by his full name. Charles Liu, I said evenly, firmly, as his equal. First of all, I have no feelings for you, so it's not about being jealous of Claire or not accepting her. Second, yes, I came from the countryside, but people from rural places are still people. Some are good, some are bad, just like city folks. You don't have to keep using where I'm from as a weapon to shame me. And finally, I continued, even if I'm not much, I'm honest. I know what I want and what I don't. Unlike you, who says one thing and feels another, you deceive yourself and hurt everyone around you in the process. Charles Liu, a person can't be too greedy. You can't have everything. I thought he would explode with rage, but instead I watched his clenched fists slowly loosen. His cold expression fell under the soft sunlight of early spring, and something unexpected, something like defeat, flickered across his face. After a long pause, he finally spoke in a low voice. "Rachel," he said, "did you really never consider marrying me?" I hesitated for a few seconds, then slowly looked up at him. That brief silence seemed to darken his expression even more. He suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm, hard. The pain shot straight through me. I tried to pull away. "I never have," I said. "I've never once thought about marrying you." Charles roared, "Don't you dare say never again." I had never seen that kind of desperation, or that kind of fury in his eyes before. For a split second, I faltered, wondering if he truly had feelings for me, but I quickly crushed that ridiculous thought. How could he? The tenderness he showed clear you. I had never once seen that side of him myself. Spring was blooming beautifully along the roadside, but the seasons would keep turning. I still had so much more to do with my life. I extinguished that last flicker of foolish hope. After that, Charles started showing up at school from time to time, always using one excuse or another. But every time he came, he still couldn't stop talking about Claire. I avoided him whenever I could. I didn't want to get entangled anymore. The debt I owed him for getting me into college, and the guilt I felt about breaking off the engagement, I chose to repay to his parents instead. I knew Charles was busy. Claire and Evan were still living in the Liu household. After all, Evan was the child of the man who saved Charles's life. His parents wouldn't speak against the arrangement outright, but I could tell they disapproved of how Charles kept them so close under the pretense of gratitude. They preferred to live alone and didn't return to the Liu house often. Knowing how lonely that must be, I often spent the money I earned from part-time work buying them thoughtful gifts. Whenever I had free time, I visited to keep them company, watching TV, playing chess, or simply chatting. It made them happy. As my senior year neared its end, Mr. Liu turned 50. He invited me back for a family dinner to celebrate. I felt grateful. He considered me part of the family. I spent all the money I had earned from work to buy him a special birthday gift. Holding that present, I returned once again to the Liu household. I helped Mrs. Wang in the kitchen. Mrs. Liu loved my sweet and sour ribs. Meanwhile, Claire sat with them in the living room, chatting sweetly. She kept nudging Evan toward them, coaxing him to call them Grandpa and Grandma. Again and again, putting on her usual eager charm. Mr. and Mrs. Liu politely humoured her. Everything was fine until dinner. Mrs. Liu praised my cooking, saying the ribs were just how she liked them. Suddenly, Claire let out a dramatic scream. "There's a cockroach in the sweet and sour ribs." That's when it hit me. Why Evan had been running in and out of the kitchen earlier, something he'd never done before. The cockroach had been planted. Claire had made her son put it there. Charles frowned at me. "It's your idea of helping to cook for my mother's birthday. And this is the result." Claire immediately stood up and took the dish away, putting on her usual perfect act. Ji Chen, don't blame Rachel. She worked hard all night. Even if she didn't do a great job, she tried her best. I let out a cold laugh. What a performance. The villain playing the heroine again. Charles slammed his chopsticks onto the table. "Rachel, why do you always say things that lack grace? Why do you always act without class?" I took a deep breath and was about to respond when Mrs. Von Liu looked at Claire, then at Evan, then at her son, and finally at me. She had figured it all out. She snapped at Charles. "Why are you yelling at Rachel? If you've got such high standards, go make something yourself. All you do is bully her when it's time to eat." I hadn't wanted to cause trouble, especially not on Mrs. Lou's birthday. I'd been planning to speak with his parents soon about ending the engagement, but Charles wouldn't let it go. "Claire's right," he muttered. "You'll always just be a pile of mud from the countryside." Now, not only did he not defend me, he joined Claire in humiliating me. Well, if I was so lowly and unwelcome, there was no need to cling to this any longer. I set my chopsticks down and stood up, bowing deeply to Mr. and Mrs. Lou. I said, "Thank you, Uncle and Auntie, for all your kindness. Without you, I wouldn't have made it into the city." Then I turned to Charles, "And thank you, Officer Lou, for helping me prove myself and giving me the chance to attend university." I looked him in the eyes for a moment. Then I added clearly and calmly, "I've thought about it, and I believe the best way to repay your kindness is not to marry you. So you and Claire can finally be together, the way you've always wanted." Then I turned back to Mr. and Mrs. Lou. "Uncle, Auntie, please consider this a formal request. I respectfully ask to dissolve the engagement between Charles and me. I'd still be honored to be like half a daughter to you, if you'll have me. But not being able to become your daughter-in-law in this life, that's my loss," I said sincerely. "I hope Uncle and Auntie will give me their blessing." Mr. and Mrs. Lou were stunned on the spot. Charles had never been so humiliated before. He let out a cold laugh. "Fine, the engagement is off, effective immediately. I'm going to marry Claire." He turned around and stormed out in anger. Back at the table, Claire suppressed a faint, almost imperceptible smile of satisfaction. As I was leaving the Lou residence, I overheard Charles' parents berating him. "You'd throw away a decent girl like her, and instead cling to that widow and her son. You ungrateful son, you've lost your mind. Shameless, you've embarrassed the whole Lou family. Where do we even put our faces now?" That moment reminded me again. Whatever kindness the Lou parents had shown me wasn't truly for me as a person. It was just because, for now, I happened to be the most acceptable fallback option for a daughter-in-law. If Claire had been in my place, she would have been the one they favored. But I'd lived one life already. I no longer clung to naive beliefs about human nature. People chase after what benefits them. That's how the world works. I no longer resented that. I just wanted to live true to myself. 1 month later, as the only graduating student from Capital Institute selected for a national project, I signed a confidentiality agreement with the country's top aerospace program and departed for a classified research base in the south. From that moment on, I disappeared from Beijing. By the time Charles realized I was gone and searched every corner of the city for me, I was already deep in training at the southern base, part of a team working on the development of manned spaceflight rockets. Professor Li Mengwan left me a message, telling me Charles had come looking for him, begging to know where I had gone. All he said was, "She's gone south." I don't know how Charles managed to find the location of the classified base, but he showed up anyway, storming in without regard for protocol. The security team immediately detained him. After verifying his identity and confirming his background, they escalated it to the base leadership. He wasn't punished for trespassing, but he was ordered to return to Beijing at once. At age 35, when our country's first test spacecraft successfully launched, the nation rejoiced in celebration. And I, Rachel, was one of the 3 core engineers behind the project, a milestone in our manned spaceflight technology. As the rocket lifted off and soared into the endless night sky, I stood in silence beneath the vastness of space, filled with gratitude. The universe was immense, and for the first time, I knew this was where my life's purpose truly lay. I had no regrets. Later that night, Professor Li called to congratulate me. He brought up Charles again. He said that in the end, Charles had indeed married Claire, and their relationship had become the talk of the town. Perhaps because Professor Li knew me better than anyone else from school, Charles eventually saw him out, drinking quietly and pouring his heart out. He told him that from the very first moment he saw me, he knew I was different. He said he'd fallen for me long ago, but he couldn't let go of Claire. He admitted it was all his own fault, his own selfishness, that I'd been right when I said he was too greedy, wanting both at once. He said at his mother's 50th birthday dinner, when he heard me truly break off the engagement, he'd panicked and lost control. In his anger, he'd shouted that he would marry Claire, defying his parents for the first time. The moment he said it, he regretted it. Only after I graduated, left, and cut all contact, vanishing into the southern base, did he finally realize that his heart no longer had room for anyone but me. But Claire had seized on his angry declaration and used it to her advantage. She stirred up public gossip, fueling speculation about their ambiguous relationship. The disciplinary committee summoned Charles, warning him about his conduct. Pressed to give an explanation, he had no choice but to go through with the marriage to Claire. Because of the scandal, Charles was demoted. His career, once so promising, took a steep dive. While others around him continued to rise, he sank lower and lower. Claire resented him, often blaming him for his failures. He grew sick with anger and stress. His parents distanced themselves from him, refusing to speak to him anymore. His PTSD worsened. He and Claire never had children. In the end, Charles came to resent Claire deeply. Whenever his illness flared up, Charles often experienced hallucinations. Just like in the previous life when he had beaten Emily, he now laid hands on Claire. The two of them were constantly caught up in petty, endless domestic arguments. Until one day, when Claire once again provoked him, mocking that he was useless, he lost control and accidentally struck her so hard he blinded her in one eye. Someone with an agenda reported him. That incident ended Charles's career for good. He was forcibly committed to a long-term care facility. Claire moved into the old Liu family estate with her son Ethan, living off what remained of the Liu family's assets. She didn't care about Charles or his parents. She said the Liu family owed her, that this was her rightful due. At the facility, when Charles was disoriented, he would murmur my name again and again. When he was lucid, he'd lash out at himself, cursing his own worthlessness, blaming himself for losing a good woman, for letting his only shot at a happy life slip away. Hearing all this from Professor Li Mengwan, I let out a long sigh. I couldn't help but feel a little pity for Mr. and Mrs. Liu. When I returned to Beijing to visit them, they were already hunched and frail, both struggling with illness. When they saw me, they gripped my hands tightly, their cloudy eyes brimming with tears. I couldn't hold back my own, but every person has their own fate, and we all must follow the path laid before us. As I left their home, I happened to run into Lai Jiaqing, who had come to visit as well. He told me that years ago, after introducing me to Charles, Charles had been very pleased. Not long after, he helped Lai Jiaqing return to the city. But Charles had specifically asked him not to tell me. He said I needed to be tempered, to become a better future wife for a high-ranking official. A proper Liu family daughter-in-law. He said 4 years was the right amount of time, enough for both of us to repay our debts. For me to take care of Claire and Ethan, to repay the debt owed to Rachel's late father. And after those 4 years, he would let go of the emotional burden, relocate Claire and Ethan elsewhere, and finally live a peaceful life with me at the Liu estate. I just found it laughable. I shook my head. Charles never understood me. In this life, I never wanted to cling to anyone. I never dreamed of becoming someone's wife, someone's daughter-in-law, someone's mother. From beginning to end, it was all just wishful thinking on his part. Lai Jiaqing also told me that he'd heard from folks back in the village. Walter Harris, now a criminal, had been arrested for soliciting prostitutes. Emily contracted a difficult illness from him and was now considered unmarriageable. She cried every day, her life an utter misery. All her anger was directed at my mother, blaming her for failing to give her a better future. When they saw me appear on national television, standing among the honorees at a state commendation ceremony, red flags waving, streamers flying, applause thundering, they couldn't believe their eyes. My mother cried as she screamed at Emily, insisting that her current misery was all her own fault for not listening. She still believed that if Emily had obeyed her and married Charles, then this shining, celebrated life should have belonged to Emily. What she never understood was this: in any life, light or dark, storm or sunshine, you must steer your own course. If you hand your fate over to others, you can only surrender to whatever comes. So they resented me, they blamed each other. And together, they They spent the rest of their bitter lives in that small, forgotten village. As for me, my life was only just beginning. When my colleague Ethan Joe confessed his feelings for me, I accepted, but I made it clear I would continue striving for my dream, dedicating my life to the great mission of national revival. I would leave my footprints on that long and difficult path. I told him I wouldn't be tied down by domestic trivialities or traditional family roles. Ethan simply nodded and said he understood. That was exactly what he admired about me, and he would support me wholeheartedly. In this life, I, Rachel, belonged to no one but myself. Ethan and I never had children. We spent our lives together, side by side, contributing everything we had to the aerospace industry. Even now, we're still on the front lines, fighting for the stars. We moved in rhythm with the times, creating with joy and determination a world that changed by the day, full of new life and energy. We shed sweat and tears, stayed through the darkness, and welcomed the sunrise. We bore witness to each launch that reached for the moon and every satellite that pierced the sky. As we looked up into the vast universe, I felt no regret in this life. Until one New Year's Eve, I received a call from the nursing home. An old man named Charles Liu was nearing the end. He said he had always hoped to see me one last time. I was stunned for a moment. That name belonged to a distant memory. After a long sigh, I asked Ethan Joe for his thoughts. With his support, I decided to go. Charles was frail and gaunt, lying on the bed, speaking with the last of his strength. December 7th, 1977, he said. My unit was assigned to secure the first reinstated national college entrance exam. I was patrolling the exam site and saw a girl run in at the last moment, shivering from the cold, breathless. But there was a light in her eyes I'd never seen before. I fell in love with her at first sight. I did everything I could to keep her close. In my last life, she was replaced by her sister. In this life, I finally got her, but I was afraid. Afraid she would leave the Liu family once she succeeded in her studies. I knew how much college meant to her, so I threatened her with it, forbidding her from moving out. But I was also afraid she'd turn out like her sister, bitter, arrogant, unreasonable, filling our marriage with failure and misery. So I kept testing her, observing her, pushing her, trying to figure her out. Charles grew more agitated as he spoke, his voice rising and falling, faltering in places. It was all my fault. I was too greedy. I missed my chance. I pushed her away with my own hands, he whispered. I stared at him, shaken. He reached out with a trembling hand and asked, Rachel, all my life, I've wanted to ask you face to face. If Claire hadn't been there, would you have chosen me? Would there have been even the slightest chance you'd have stayed and spent your life with me? Before I could answer, his hand fell silent. His breath stopped. He was gone. Charles Liu never got his answer. Even as he left this world, he never understood that the things he clung to so tightly were never important to me at all. The blazing flame of ambition in my heart had always burned brighter than anything else. That was my truth. That was what truly mattered.